We're joined right now by former Secretary of State and our Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, Mike Pompeo. I might ask him about that in a bit, but I do want to get to what we've seen this week. Secretary Pompeo, it's news all over the place with different narratives about the threat of Russia actually attacking Ukraine with like a full-scale invasion. I mean, there were reports that it was going to happen today. There's also reports that Russia's pulling back troops. What do you read about where this stands as we speak?
Well, Jordan, it appears to me that the Russians are maintaining a massive force both on their western flank on the Ukrainian border as well as in Belarus. And so the risk that Putin decides to extract through coercive measures something from the West, something from the United States, I think is still real. I know yesterday said he was moving some stuff around. Fair enough. He may well be. But I don't think the moment has passed. I think Putin is still intent on pushing the Biden administration around and seeing how much he can get from them if they continue to show weakness.
Yeah, I have a question, Mike. The president gave a speech, it was yesterday, as an update to the diplomatic efforts, and he also issued a warning. He said, quote, "If Russia proceeds, we will rally the world." Now, thus far, the world doesn't seem to be very united. In fact, NATO doesn't seem to be very united, and Germany is stone silent because they want the Nord Stream, of course, the gas line to go through. What's your sense of what the president said yesterday, and how would have you handled it if you were the president?
Jay, I think you're absolutely right. I think he was wishing, not stating a matter of fact. I think Europeans in the East have one view, and the Baltic states have one view. You know this well when you made the good work that you did in Europe and with the ECJ. You know that this is not a monolithic bloc for sure. The Germans seem intent on trying to find a way not to have to stand up to Russia, whether it was finishing the Nord Stream 2 pipeline or allowing Putin to run roughshod over more broadly their political system. There is deep division within Europe, and I watched Secretary General of NATO, Secretary General Stoltenberg, a good man, trying to corral these animals. But that task falls to leadership from the United States, and it has been woefully absent.
Secretary President Biden yesterday said that this could be days, weeks, months. And I look at what Russia's doing. Is part of their strategy? I mean, again, they do have like you said, the resources to invade if they want to. But it's also like if we can just surround a country with 100,000 plus troops and we just keep that chokehold, then the world will keep making concessions. So in a sense, without invading, they get what they want. And so I saw that it seemed like the can was kicked down the road a bit, even in his own remarks, still warning that it could happen at any moment, but also that it could be months long, that we could see, and it already has been months long, so it could continue on this kind of chokehold of Ukraine.
Jordan, I remember when I spent time with Putin and with my counterpart, a fellow named Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia. They didn't have a stopwatch. They were determined to continue their efforts. I think they saw this change from President Trump to President Biden, and said, this is our window of opportunity. Let's begin to exert more and more pressure until we find steel, until we find resolve. They haven't seen that yet. Your point's exactly right. We saw the cyber attacks yesterday. These were very significant inside of Ukraine. They'll have repercussions for American companies that are doing business there as well. This is serious stuff, and I don't expect, even if Putin should pull back, he brings the division back or he moves some equipment out of Belarus, I don't expect to see any reduction in how Vladimir Putin is applying pressure against the United States and Europe until the United States demonstrates, not through press conferences, not through speeches, but through actual deeds, that we're prepared to take risk, but to impose cost on Russia in doing so. If they don't see that, if they don't see deterrence and strength from the United States, they'll continue to push us around.
One of the things that is interesting here is, I think, Mike, that Putin's plan, at least part of what he was trying to accomplish, and maybe he has accomplished it, was to weaken NATO and fracture NATO. And if you just kind of like asymmetrical warfare here. And, I use that quote from Disraeli often, which says, diplomacy can be war. Depending on how that diplomacy is used. I mean, he has fractured NATO, at least in all appearance, it has fractured NATO. The Secretary of Defense is dealing with that in Geneva today. But if that was a goal, has Putin already accomplished one of the things he wanted to do?
Every time you see a statement from Germany conflict with someone from Sweden or Finland or one of the Nordic countries or Baltic country or Estonia, he is accomplishing a purpose. He is sending his message to the world that this vaunted force, this NATO force, this U.S. transatlantic alliance is weaker than everyone thinks it is. Don't forget, too, even as this is going on in Ukraine, don't forget what's going on in other parts of Europe, specifically in Vienna, where the United States is sitting on the same side of the table with the Russians and the Chinese negotiating with the Iranians. So Putin is playing a multi-level game. He's playing a very strategic effort. And what's missing, what's different, Jay, is that, remember, Putin hasn't changed. Why didn't this happen for the last 4 years? Putin hasn't changed. What changed was American resolve and leadership. That's the thing that is fundamentally missing here. And whether it's caving and appeasing the Iranians or allowing the Russians to shut down pipeline in the southeast part of our country for 3 days and deny gas to people of the southeast United States, these are the things that bad guys, authoritarian and dictators see around the world, and they will work alongside of each other to undermine our country and American interests.
You know, one of the topics, just getting domestic for a little bit here. You travel the country. You're working with a lot of candidates right now across the country. They're talking to voters. You're talking to voters every day. And we know one of the top issues is it's parents and education and what's happened in the public schools. And we saw last night in San Francisco, Secretary Pompeo, something amazing, where voters there, not particularly conservative, just parents who were thinking about their kids, voted 70+% to recall the school board president, vice president, and the one commissioner who was subject already to a recall. And they did it because they said the school board was spending too much time on social justice, racial issues, renaming schools instead of reopening schools. This message, I know that you're traveling the country. I think it's not just in the most liberal city. It's all across the country. Parents waking up that they do have the power if they speak up, and they shouldn't feel scared to because the Department of Justice tries to label them as terrorists.
Jordan, parents from the inner city, parents from rural environments, parents from big towns and small towns all across America want one thing for their kids. They want them to be able to live the American way of life and have a chance to do just a little bit better than they did. And they saw these last 2 years that the kids were being taught garbage, things that weren't going to help them, that 2 + 2 wasn't really 4, and that the most important thing to talk about was one's race. That don't work for anyone. That's not going to work for any parent. So what you saw in San Francisco, it happened in my hometown of Wichita, Kansas, where we had school board members thrown out. It was just enough of this silliness. This wasn't partisan. It wasn't political. It was about making sure that the most important institution, right, the places we teach our children, is actually delivering on that outcome for kids all across the country. So it doesn't surprise me at all what happened in San Francisco yesterday.
As always, Secretary Pompeo, we appreciate our senior counsel for global affairs.